a name that echoes through nightmares. In the shadowed annals of criminal history, where darkness takes human form and evil wears a familiar face, few names inspire the same bone-deep chill as Daniel Camargo Barbosa. Known by the spine-tingling moniker, the sadist of El Charquito, this Colombian predator carved a path of terror across two nations that would forever stain the memories of those who lived through his reign of horror. His story is not merely one of murder, it is a descent into the most depraved corners of human psychology, where childhood trauma transformed into an instrument of unthinkable evil that would claim the lives of at least 72 innocent children, though investigators believe the true toll may have reached as high as 180 young souls. What makes Daniel Camargo Barbosa's story particularly chilling is not just the scope of his crimes, but the methodical, calculated nature of his predatory behavior that spanned over 2 decades. Unlike the frenzied killings of crimes of passion, his murders were acts of deliberate sadism, each one carefully planned and executed with the precision of a craftsman perfecting his dark art. His victims were always the most vulnerable, young girls whose only crime was existing in a world where monsters masqueraded as grandfathers, where trust could be weaponized, and where innocence became the very quality that sealed their doom. The genesis of a monster. A childhood forged in hell's furnace. Born on the cold morning of January 22nd, 1930, in the rural Colombian town of Anolaima, Cundinamarca, Daniel Camargo Barbosa entered a world that seemed determined to destroy him from his very first breath. His story begins with the kind of tragedy that reads like the opening chapter of a Gothic horror novel. His mother's death before he had even celebrated his first birthday, leaving him in the care of a father whose emotional distance would prove to be the least of the child's problems. The true architect of Daniel's psychological destruction was his stepmother, Dioselina Fernandez, a woman whose inability to bear children of her own manifested in a campaign of systematic psychological and physical torture that would make the cruelest fictional villains pale in comparison. Unable to have the daughter she desperately wanted, Fernandez decided to create one from the vulnerable boy who had been placed in her care. What followed was a years-long campaign of humiliation so severe and sustained that it would fundamentally rewire Daniel's understanding of gender, power, and human dignity. The most devastating aspect of Fernandez's abuse involved forcing Daniel to dress in girls' clothing and attend school in feminine attire, transforming what should have been a place of learning into a daily gauntlet of humiliation. Imagine, if you will, the horror of a young boy being forced to walk through the school gates each morning, knowing that his classmates would see him in dresses, that their laughter would follow him through the hallways like a pack of hunting dogs, and that there would be no escape, no refuge, because his tormentor lived in his own home. But the cross-dressing humiliation was merely the tip of an iceberg of abuse that plunged to unimaginable depths. Fernandez would strip Daniel from the waist down and beat him with a bullwhip, the leather cutting into his flesh while she screamed about his failures as a boy, his inadequacy as a son, his very existence as a burden she was forced to bear. When Daniel would inevitably get into fights at school, desperate attempts to defend whatever shred of masculine dignity he had left, Fernandez would invite his classmates to their home to witness his punishment, removing his pants, forcing him into women's clothing, and allowing them to mock and ridicule him in the supposed safety of his own home. The psychological warfare was as relentless as it was creative, Fernandez would force Daniel to answer to feminine names, to walk and talk like a girl, to perform household chores while dressed in women's clothing, all while telling him that she was trying to convert him into a woman. The message was clear and consistently reinforced. His masculinity was not just wrong, it was disgusting, shameful, something to be beaten out of him like a demon during an exorcism. Despite this sustained campaign of psychological destruction, Daniel demonstrated remarkable intellectual gifts, excelling academically at the Leon 13 school in Bogota with a reported IQ of 116. His intelligence became both a blessing and a curse. It allowed him to understand the full scope of his humiliation in ways that a less intelligent child might not have grasped. But it also gave him the analytical tools that he would later use to plan and execute his crimes with terrifying efficiency. The abuse was so comprehensive and systematic that it created what psychologists would later identify as a complete inversion of Daniel's relationship with femininity. Rather than developing a healthy understanding of gender roles and relationships, he learned to associate female identity with humiliation, power with violence, and control with the infliction of suffering. Every day of his childhood was a lesson in how power dynamics work, how the strong dominate the weak, and how sexual identity could be used as a weapon of mass psychological destruction. The making of a predator's mind. The psychological impact of this systematic childhood abuse cannot be overstated. Daniel later explained that his stepmother was trying to convert me into a woman, and that while she might have loved him, she couldn't love me as a boy. This fundamental rejection of his male identity, combined with the sexual humiliation and physical abuse, created what Professor Absalón Jiménez Becerra identified as hatred toward the opposite sex that would become Daniel's primary motivation for violence. The abuse created a psychological paradox that would define Daniel's entire criminal career. He both craved and despised female attention, both sought and feared feminine approval, both desired and wanted to destroy the very thing that had been used to torture him throughout his childhood. His stepmother had succeeded in her twisted project too well. She had indeed converted Daniel, not into a woman, but into something far more dangerous. A man whose entire understanding of sexuality, power, and human relationships had been poisoned at its very source. This psychological foundation would prove crucial in understanding Daniel's later crimes. His obsession with virginity, his preference for child victims, his methodical approach to rape and murder. All of these elements can be traced directly back to the lessons his stepmother taught him about power, control, and the weaponization of sexual identity. She had shown him that the most effective way to destroy someone was to attack their sexual dignity, their bodily autonomy, their sense of themselves as complete human beings. When Daniel grew up and began his criminal career, he was simply applying the lessons he had learned at his stepmother's knee. The evolution of a sexual predator, from victim to victimizer. Daniel's entry into adulthood was marked by a desperate attempt to establish some semblance of normal human relationships, but the psychological damage inflicted during his childhood had created fissures in his psyche that would prove impossible to repair. His first serious relationship was with a woman named Alcira Castillo, whom he married in 1960 and with whom he had 2 children. For a brief shining moment, it seemed as though Daniel might overcome his traumatic past and build something resembling a normal life. But the fragile equilibrium of this relationship was shattered in 1967 when Daniel discovered Alcira with another man. This betrayal activated every lesson his stepmother had taught him about the fundamental untrustworthiness of women, their capacity for deception, their ability to use sexuality as a weapon of emotional destruction. The discovery didn't just end his marriage, it served as a psychological trigger that connected his childhood trauma with his adult experiences, creating a feedback loop of rage and resentment that would fuel his transformation into a killer. Soon after his marriage dissolved, Daniel began a relationship with a 28-year-old woman named Esperanza, whom he planned to marry. In many ways, Esperanza represented Daniel's last chance at redemption, his final opportunity to establish a healthy relationship with a woman that might heal some of the wounds inflicted during his childhood. But when Daniel discovered that Esperanza was not a virgin, his damaged psyche could not process this reality in any healthy way. Rather than end the relationship or seek help for his obsessive thoughts about female purity, Daniel proposed a solution that revealed the full extent of his psychological corruption. He convinced Esperanza to help him find virgin girls whom he could rape, creating one of the most disturbing criminal partnerships in modern history. The birth of a criminal partnership. The methodology of Daniel and Esperanza's crimes was both calculated and horrifying. Rather than random acts of violence, their rapes followed a carefully choreographed script that revealed Daniel's growing sophistication as a predator. Esperanza would lure young girls to their apartment under false pretenses, promises of work, offers of help, invitations to social gatherings, then drug them with sodium seconal sleeping pills while Daniel raped them. This partnership represented a crucial escalation in Daniel's criminal behavior. No longer content to simply fantasize about his violent urges, he had found a way to systematically act upon them while maintaining a veneer of normalcy in his daily life. Esperanza's participation was crucial, not just for practical reasons, her ability to gain the trust of potential victims, but for psychological ones as well. Her willingness to participate in his crimes validated his twisted worldview, confirming his belief that women were fundamentally corrupt and that his actions were somehow justified. The psychological dynamics of their partnership were deeply disturbing. After each rape, Esperanza would have sex with Daniel, symbolically representing the loss of her own virginity and participating in the destruction of the qualities he claimed to value. This ritual transformed her from an accomplice into a participant in his psychological theater, playing the role of the virgin he could never truly possess, while simultaneously helping him destroy the virginity of others.
This pattern continued with 5 victims before their arrest.
And significantly, during this initial phase, Daniel did not kill his victims, restraint that would later disappear entirely. The rapes were acts of violation and control, but they stopped short of murder, suggesting that Daniel still retained some psychological barriers against taking human life. The partnership came to an end when the 5th victim reported the crime to authorities. Both Daniel and Esperanza were arrested and taken to separate prisons, never to see each other again. Initially sentenced to 3 years in prison, Daniel was actually grateful for what he perceived as leniency and even swore to repent and reform his behavior. However, when a new judge reviewed the case and increased his sentence to 8 years, Daniel's attitude changed dramatically. This perceived injustice ignited his rebellious anger and marked the beginning of his transformation from rapist to killer. The increased sentence represented a crucial psychological turning point. In Daniel's mind, the justice system had betrayed him, just as his stepmother had, just as his wife had, just as every woman in his life eventually had. The additional 5 years in prison became 5 years of brooding resentment, 5 years of planning revenge, 5 years of psychological preparation for the escalation of his crimes, from rape to murder. First kill, crossing the Rubicon, from sexual predator to child killer. Following his release from prison in 1973, Daniel's life took on the characteristics of a man marking time before an inevitable explosion. He was arrested in Brazil for being undocumented and was subsequently deported. But due to delays in transferring his criminal records from Colombia, he was released with his false identity intact, allowing him to return to Colombia undetected. Back in Colombia, Daniel took up work as a street vendor in Barranquilla, selling television monitors on the sidewalks. This occupation provided him with the perfect cover for his predatory behavior. It required him to travel throughout the city, to approach strangers, to be friendly and personable, to blend into the urban landscape like a shark in murky water. His job as a vendor was not just employment, it was reconnaissance, allowing him to study potential victims, to understand the rhythms of daily life, to identify the most vulnerable targets. It was during this period that Daniel crossed the line from rape to murder, a transition that would define the rest of his criminal career. The transformation happened on what seemed like an ordinary day, as Daniel was walking past a school and observed the children playing during recess. Among them was a 9-year-old girl whose innocence and vulnerability triggered something primal and horrifying in Daniel's damaged psyche. The kidnapping was opportunistic, but the murder was calculated. Daniel approached the girl with the same friendly demeanor he used to sell his television monitors, gaining her trust before leading her away from the safety of the school grounds. Once he had her isolated, he raped her with the same methodical precision he had perfected during his partnership with Esperanza. But then came the moment that would transform him from a serial rapist into a serial killer. The decision to murder her. His reasoning was chillingly practical. I killed her so she wouldn't be able to tell the police. This was not a crime of passion or a moment of uncontrolled rage. It was a calculated decision based on his previous experience with the justice system. He had learned that rape victims could testify against their attackers, could send them to prison, could disrupt their ability to continue their crimes. Murder, however, created only silent victims. The murder itself was brutal and methodical. He strangled the life out of a child who had done nothing more than capture his attention during a school recess. As he watched the light fade from her eyes, Daniel experienced what he would later describe as a sense of complete control, a feeling of power that dwarfed anything he had experienced during his previous rapes. The child's death represented the ultimate expression of his dominance, the final answer to every humiliation he had suffered at the hands of his stepmother. The careless criminal. Despite the calculated nature of the murder, Daniel's capture revealed a carelessness that would prove characteristic of many serial killers. He was arrested on May 3, 1974, when he returned to the scene of the crime to retrieve the television screens he had forgotten beside the victim's body. This return to the crime scene, driven by his need to recover his merchandise, demonstrated both his practical concerns as a street vendor and his psychological need to revisit the site of his triumph. The arrest was almost anticlimactic after the horror of the crime itself. Police officers found Daniel at the crime scene standing over the body of his victim, trying to collect his forgotten televisions, as if he were simply cleaning up after a day's work. The mundane nature of his capture, worrying about lost inventory while surrounded by the evidence of child murder, revealed the chilling compartmentalization that allowed him to function as both a working man and a killer. Although investigators suspected him of involvement in the deaths of up to 80 girls in Colombia during this period, Daniel was convicted only of the rape and murder of the 9-year-old girl. The inability to connect him to other crimes would prove to be a recurring theme throughout his criminal career. Law enforcement agencies were often overwhelmed by the scope of his crimes and lacked the resources or coordination to build comprehensive cases against him. Initially sentenced to 30 years in prison, his sentence was later reduced to 25 years. On December 24, 1977, he was transferred to what would become his home for the next 7 years, the prison on Gorgona Island, Colombia's equivalent of Alcatraz.